in 2014, already before elections, we knew who will be the Speaker of the Parliament, who will be the Commissioner, what two parties will be the main parties. Everything was known. Why would you go and vote? I mean, you go and vote and you feel like an idiot because nothing depends on you. This is why 25% of votes went to populist parties. Because if you want to save your dignity, or just simple fact that something depends on you, you have only one choice, to vote for populists or to vote for establishment. No matter like if it's left-wing part of the establishment or right-wing part. So this was like, you know, asking people for doing something with this. And today, we will have a situation when actually it's not that clear anymore. There will be no clear coalition of establishment. Well, actually, if you count votes, anyway, EPP will have the decisive voice, because without EPP, there is no other majority possible. If you count voices, if you count seats, possible seats for Socialist, Greens, and Macron plus ALDE together, they don't have majority. So EPP will anyway will be necessary. But anyway, something is a little bit different than before. Of course, populists will get a lot more, and mainstream parties will get less. I mean, at least the traditional mainstream, because you know the left is in a really terrible situation in Europe, except for Portugal. The Christian Democrats as well are losing votes. You have like this kind of enlightened populists like Macron, and like hardcore populists like PiS. They will still get, I think they will lose elections, but still they will get a lot of votes in Poland. So they will be okay, even if they will not get majority. But the problem actually, and this is why Orban is still in EPP, is that they don't want to give to the populists of Europe a real leader. This is why they accept him in EPP. Although, you know, I disagree with Mate. I mean, for me, it was clear that anti-Semitism is on the rise. And the argument that you don't have, that the Jews are voting for, the Jews were always voting for the monarch, because only monarch could save their, actually the real anti-Semitism, the like extermination anti-Semitism began only when the democracy arose. Before, the Jewish community could negotiate their fate with the monarch. And then they were like more or less safe, more or less. Pogroms happened everywhere, isolation happened, ghettos, etc. But the Holocaust was possible only when democracy arose, when Jews started to depend on the masses. So it's not an argument that the Jews vote. You know, gays usually vote for the parties that anyway disagreed, or like traditionally. Now it has changed in the West. But the anti-Semitic campaign against Soros is a clear proof that it's just anti-Semitism, that it's an integral part of Orban.
If I may respond to that first, I agreed with the unpredictability of elections, and I agree that I think from my perspective the big question is the internal dynamics of the EPP. That's very interesting, and that's something we have to pay attention to. Secondly, regarding anti-Semitism, I don't think still that the Orban government includes anti-Semitism to a great extent. I mean, let me elaborate on that. First, I didn't mean the Jewish vote. I don't know how the Jews in Hungary vote, actually. I didn't read anything about that. I meant that the leaders of the Jewish community, many of them support Orban publicly. And my experience when they are saying that the Soros campaign was anti-Semitic, I don't think that that's true. I mean, I agree that there are some elements of that campaign which brings back the memory of the Hungarian people regarding the anti-Semitic campaigns of the 30s and the 40s, that's for sure, but that doesn't mean that it is an anti-Semitic campaign, actually. That means that it uses some elements which were used back then in the 30s and the 40s. The fact that an element is used in both cases doesn't mean that it became an anti-Semitic thing. Actually, and the Jewish community doesn't perceive it as anti-Semitic.
I don't know which Jewish community you mean, but saying that there is a Jew, there is a global player, so he rules the world, and he wants to damage country, and it's paid by the government. It's the clear anti-Semitic cliché, which is kind of a main part of the politics of government that serves to win election. Like, what more you need? And the fact that leaders of Jewish community, some of them support Orban. Listen, Judenrat were also cooperating, and you can even sometimes say supporting the Nazis, but it doesn't mean that the Nazis were not anti-Semites. Usually, oppressed minorities are trying to use different strategies to save themselves. So finding that some of the leaders are supporting you, it's not at all any argument for discussing the anti-Semitism.
I think yes, to some extent it is an argument. I'm just saying that this is a more complex question. The fact that George Soros is a Jew is never mentioned in these campaigns. It is not mentioned that he is a Jew. He happens to be a Jew, that's true, but that is not in the campaign. And if everybody says this, that you are targeting a Jew, the government and everybody related to government who is serious enough will say that no, this is not the reason. And actually the fact that you who thinks that this is anti-Semitic, is actually doing the anti-Semitism because you highlight that he's a Jew. I never said that that's the problem with it.
Do you know any anti-Semite that says I'm an anti-Semite?
No, I'm not saying that you are. I'm just saying that the government would say so in this debate.
I'm saying that do you know any anti-Semite today that agrees that and introduces himself, I'm an anti-Semite? All anti-Semites are saying, I'm not an anti-Semite, but...
No, that's also not true. Your big politicians sometimes say that they are anti-Semite. And on the other hand, actually during the migration campaign, it was the Orban government which said that we are defending the Jewish community from Islam, which is, I wouldn't agree with this statement, but many members of the Jewish community agreed to this because they said that, yeah, Islam is a problem, and if the ratio of Muslim people would rise in Hungary, that would cause more anti-Semitic attacks on the Jewish community. So I would say that when you are seeing Hungary, I think that this anti-Semitic viewpoint is not describing reality. So this issue is much more complex, I think.
If I may, because this is also an interesting point. I mean, there is no discrepancy between oppressing the minority that likes to oppress another minority. So oppressing Jews that are in the same time Islamophobes doesn't mean that there is no oppression of Jews. You understand me?
What is your criterion for oppression of Jews in Hungary? What is what does oppression of the Jews mean in Hungary? I don't think that or anti-Semitism in general. I don't think that the fact that there is now a campaign against somebody who happens to be a Jew constitutes as anti-Semitism, because, if you cannot criticize a Jew, then that's not, I don't think that this is...
okay, so why it's Soros? Why? Because, so then why...
Not because he's a Jew, but he's a symbol of this idea of supporting NGOs everywhere in the world. And that's a thing. Soros supports these NGOs.
Rockefeller supports, Ford supports, Gates supports. Why Soros then?
Because he's Hungarian. I mean, he was born a Hungarian, so he can become a symbol of that.
But those are very good points in a row. So let me just try to unpack that a little bit, because your contribution was very important. In 2013, there was a series of talks in California called Beyond Belief. And I'm bringing that because you asked Mate about the influence of religion. And at the time, it's like, how can we show believers that their belief in God, it's not a rational belief? And the discussion is, well, we need better communicators. That is the thing that we need. We need people that are persuasive, they are friendly, they have a good report, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, like Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins. Sometimes he goes a little too far, but we love him anyway. So that is the first point that you mentioned. That is, we need better communicators. We need to make the difference between all this hysteria going on the internet and even on the political debate on traditional media, and to be a force for reason, a force for civil discourse, and a source for facts, real hard facts that affect us every day, like, for example, climate change. You were talking about empty science. That is something that it's hard to believe how 3% of scientists say, no, there's no climate change. And that thing keeps being brought up by the media. So you have 97%, but the other 3%, oh, they also need a voice. No, they don't. That takes me to the second point, and that is the liberal values. Because like I mentioned in my presentation, and I struggle with this a lot as a liberal myself, is I don't want to curtail people. I don't want to take their voice, have them have less freedom, less capability of accessing everything I do. But it's got to get to a point. We got to get to a point that we have to draw the line. Even as liberals, we will have to draw the line, because otherwise, our children, and we don't have one, but I understand that we're planning to have, our children will have, I don't have it. Sarka doesn't have it. I don't know about Mate, but you don't have it? So, okay, so this conversation is particularly important for the four of us. Our son is going to be an adult in 18 years from now. Our environment is going to be all screwed up in 10 years from now. So, well, me too. Actually, a blonde one, I would love that. So, yeah, we have to draw a line. Can democracy survive the internet? We have to draw a line. There's got to be a moment where we say, this is not acceptable, and from then on, we will have rules. And people will say, yeah, Luis is shaking his head, and people will say, well, but liberals are not in favor of too many rules. Well, not all of them, but some of them we should, and that is, of course, my opinion. I'll be very short because absolutely, you're absolutely right, and especially technological education. So education in school and how to deal with this new world coming. Not only for people to think by themselves, which is a great point that you mentioned, but also how to deal with this. Because we are failing our children in that particular point also. Because we're letting our children access almost everything, and parents are too busy. They're taking care of their own things. So the kids are on the iPads, are on the iPhones, and they're navigating at will, and they're getting all the stuff. Now, again, I'm not saying that we have to forbid things, but totally agree with you, we have to educate people.
I think so. This is, I consider the phenomenon of populism as a possibility to evolve and to be better in politics. As we already discussed, our political institutions in which we believe don't function in the best way possible, and this is a very understatement, right? So media doesn't work as the way it's supposed to be. Other institutions don't work the way they're supposed to be. So I think that populism can be seen as a wake-up call. That how things were done were not the good way, so we have to evolve and we have to be open to possibilities, because this actually, I really like the Slavomir's phrase regarding postpolitics. I think that, yeah, postpolitics was a problem, and I think that if we just give up on the interesting nature of politics, then we are basically done.
Or actually, maybe I shouldn't be surprised, because, in Hungary, the situation is so bad in the sense that you have really in Poland, 80% or 70% of media are free and very critical to the government. The majority of local Poland is still ruled by the opposition. There is really Kaczynski never gets more than 40%. He himself is unelectable in Poland. This is what he's the most hated politician and always was. This is why you don't have President Kaczynski, you don't have Prime Minister Kaczynski. He has to use avatars. In each campaign, the party has to hide him for 6 months. If they want to win elections, they have to show the human face, and it can never be a face of Kaczynski. So, and you remember this? I don't know who saw it, Mate or you, when there was this the support for populist parties. You know, you remember those parties were like this, and Fidesz was like this. So maybe this is the strategy. If you cannot like what you have, you start to like what you have. In a sense that if you cannot have what you like, you cannot. You have to start to like what you have. This is maybe the strategy. Because, I mean, I don't really see any good or any advantages that comes from the Orban's governing. The good thing is that they're not shooting. You know, you don't like Putin actually, but in Russia, in the Russian history, this is the most liberal government ever. For Russian people, this is the best time in Russian history. They had never more free country than they have now. And also expecting, that's what people usually think in the West, that after Putin, let's defeat Putin, we will have someone. Why? Defeating Putin, and why do you expect, for what reason you expect that someone next will be better? But this is the way we think. We're counting time when Putin will go, okay? Putin is the most liberal politician, liberal ruler of Russia ever. So maybe, I don't know, maybe this is the way to think that, to find some, advantages or to look at in more positive way to what's going on. Still, populism is better than fascism. Populism is better than Nazism, than totalitarianism. From this point of view, I mean, nobody go to the bookstores in Russia and you have the most critical books to Putin, and they are even on the screen on the windows. They are even shown on the windows. I'm sure that he doesn't like it, but he doesn't care. And I think he even, he accepts existing of the Center of Social Research like Levada. And they are very free. They do research, and it's usually they find numbers that are very critical to government about the level of democracy, freedom of speech, etc. And probably he accepts that also because even if he prefers fake news to spread, he needs also to know what's the truth. Communists in Poland first agreed to have a free social research center at the beginning of 80s. Also because themselves wanted to know what's going on in a country.
Let me rephrase. I don't think that populism is a disease. I think that there is a disease, and populism is a symptom of that. So nobody likes coughing, right? You don't like to cough. Populism is coughing, and sore throat. If you have a sore throat, that's the disease. That's what you have, and that is what you have to diagnose and to have a medication on that. So when you are coughing, that's bad. Populism is not good as well. So coughing is not bad, not good. Sorry. So coughing is not good. But if you don't cough, if you don't have this mechanism, then you never know that you have a sore throat. So coughing is good because it shows that symptoms of diseases are good because they show that there is a symptom. Hungary was not an ideal democracy before 2010, but the EU politics is not perfect. And
you want to say that Nazism is good because financial crisis of 30s is bad, poverty is bad, unemployment is bad.
But Nazism and populism is not the same.
No, but the distinguishing between symptom and the cause, I mean, it's quite artificial. And I wouldn't say that it allows us to say that the populism is good. Each historical phenomenon you can distinguish like this.
I'm trying to be careful, but I think that in this regard, when people are not, you know, the crimes of Nazism and communism are not repeated in Hungary, are not repeated in Brexit. Brexit is a very bad thing, but it's uncomparable to Nazism. I think we can agree on that. And the fact that there is a huge debate regarding Brexit, now we start to care more about, yeah, maybe things are not going in the best direction in the EU. Things were not going in the right direction in Hungary before 2010. Hungary was not a good democracy before 2010, and nobody cared about that. I don't know if you remember the events of 2006, when there was a huge outcry against the left-wing government, and the left-wing government actually started to aggressively react to these protests. And nobody in the EU stood up against that. And this is a very valid point of Fidesz and Orbán nowadays, that back then nobody cared about that. They only started to care in 2010 when Orbán came. So there is this very, how to call it, a double standard when it comes to Hungary in many instances. So, and I think that the reason that we talk much about Hungary today, even in the bad light, it's a good thing, because now you know, guys, that Hungary is in a bad shape and a bad democracy. Otherwise, without Orbán, we wouldn't know anything about that. Without Trump, we wouldn't be aware of the fact that there is a huge cultural and economic cleavage in the society about which we didn't think of. So that is why I think that populism, if you conceptualize it as a symptom, it can be a good thing on the long run. Every challenge you face, every challenge a society faces can be used to better the situation of the society later, I think. Naturally, there are extreme examples. I wouldn't say that.
I would like to attract your attention to something a little bit different, because I would understand this logic that populists showed us or proved us that something was really wrong with the democracy before. So from this point of view, they can play a positive role. And it's you know, we can think that, well, maybe there is something in this. But you know how hard will be to put an order to the mess that they're doing with the Polish law to come back to the standards that we had concerning constitutional court or generally judiciary would be very, very hard thing. And also, they are spoiling other parties. I can imagine that when Kaczynski will be defeated, there will be a lot of politicians who will try not to be like Kaczynski, but to use certain, holes that he made. Well, of course we are better. We are Democrats. We're not gonna take over media. We're not gonna do this. But maybe, we can use certain mechanisms or not to repair them. People don't see everything. People, it will be okay. So I'm afraid that, this is okay, they woke us up. We know that, democracy was unjust, that postpolitics, they didn't come from nowhere, okay? So something before didn't work, for sure. But I don't see that because of populists, we can really repair it. We are in a much worse situation because of populists, not in the better.
It's a fascinating discussion. I'm just going to step back a little bit and get what John said, and that has to do with Brexit and looking forward, because this discussion is really important about the causes and the origin. But looking forward, I'm very worried that Brexit showed for European countries how to leave the European Union, because it was presented in the United Kingdom, and you know better than I do. Brussels is the elite. The British people, we are fighting against the elite. That was pretty much the discussion. And then it was the polarization online, and the Leave campaign was substantially financed by a banker with connections to Russia. But that is another conversation. So I am worried because what Luis said, and it's very important, and that is what kind of European Union we're going to have, we think we should have one that is more democratic. Because like you said, the fact that, and you also, the fact that our European leaders, some of them are not elected directly, that will be used against the European Union. And other countries will say, we don't want this, and we will go and do our own exit. Since I have the mic, I'm going to answer because it's going to take you 30 seconds. I thought it was really interesting what Macron said with Trump. It's like, well, we should, us Europeans, we should get ready for any threat coming from Russia, from China, and from the United States. And Trump just went apeshit, which makes sense in a way, but on the other hand, NATO, it's still the alliance that we are all in. So again, it's a difficult equilibrium, and we'll have to find it.
Yeah, my answer is yes. Well, cannot be real. You know, Stalin, when he got the information that the Pope disagrees and doesn't like this policy, asked, how many divisions have Pope? So, you know, I don't believe that you can have a real European state or European federation without the possibility to defend yourself. And then you can, you know, you can have like bad opinion that American president is this one or that one. American president can be like as it wants to be, or less American society it wants to be. But we should have possibility to defend ourselves. Fortunately, it's not only a Macron opinion, it's also an opinion of Merkel. Don't forget also that Eastern Europe, the post-communist countries are the countries of second category in NATO because we don't have NATO bases. The agreement between Russia and the Western Europe when we were accessing NATO was that there will be no NATO bases, which is unfortunately, which makes us second category members, in the same time being on the frontiers. Well, you know, it already got it in America, you know, and in Russia, you know, as well. So, and even in Great Britain.
I think it's a very tough question, especially if you are phrasing it as defending or democracy surviving. I mean, when it comes to Turkey, you mentioned Turkey. Was there a Turkish democracy which was destroyed by Erdogan? So the last coup we had in Turkey was in 1997, and AKP got in government in 2002. So I wouldn't say that Turkish democracy was that strong. And this is also true to some extent to Hungary. I would say that the Hungarian democratic tradition is not so strong so that it could survive. It should be created. It should be made. Naturally, there are some elements of democratic tradition in Central Europe, in other countries, and also in Hungary. But I think that it's a prediction, and I'm not sure whether. I think it depends much on the strength of this democratic tradition. You mentioned Italy. Italy has a democratic tradition now. Other countries like the United States has a very long democratic tradition. But I would fear that those countries, such as mine, which doesn't have a strong democratic tradition, might have problems in this regard.
Well, again, like I have a problem with this kind of logic that what was before populist was not perfect, or had many disadvantages. This is why we should, I don't know, have a different opinion about populists, or be more sensitive to it, or had lower expectations, or I don't know. It doesn't give any justification to what the populists are doing. The fact that Giuliani was a liar doesn't allow, or shouldn't allow, Orban to be a liar, populist, you know, actually mafioso. There is also a difference between Poland and Hungary, because Fidesz is more like a mafia. They do big business, they have oligarchs, whereas Kaczynski created kind of a cloister. We are so ideologized country that there is no even, actually this is the least corrupted country in the region, because we are so ideologized that like money, it's not the such a motivation as ideology. So he created another cloister. As I told you, he doesn't have a bank account. Polish politicians like Tusk and others, they didn't care at all